Today it is Friday, August the 10th, 2007, and we're on Exposed. I'm Agent Ladybug, and in the background we've got Eric Huffschmidt, and both of us are going to be asking questions of our very special guest. We're most delighted to have on Sydney White, and Sydney White is quite a woman. Everyone should be going into Sydney White's class in the U of T, the Free University of U of T, and we'll get into that at the end of the interview of how one can actually go to her classes and learn something. Welcome, Sydney White.
Hi, and thank you very much for the introduction. There are many other people who are in monetary reform, as I am myself. And I think, Haley, you know that I've been with the Committee on Economic and Monetary Reform for quite a while.
That's right.
Now,
explain your background a bit to the listeners, or the listeners would know what you did in the past, so you learned all the information that you have now at your disposal, and you have a rapid-fire, wonderful classes that enlighten a lot of people, and the classes have been growing year by year. So explain to our listeners about your background, please.
Well, I started at the United Nations in the press department when I was 18, and I went from that part of the UN to the General Secretariat, and from there I worked with the British Information Services. So from the UN and the BIS, I was actually doing press releases, press reports, and most of the time editing the translations that came out from the UN Assembly. It was during the Assembly time, and I believe, if I can remember, it goes right up until March, from about September right up until March. And I was on 3 different shifts. And when the assembly is going, you have to do the shift work because everybody is there all the time. So there were no computers then, and we were just sitting there scribbling, editing on small pieces of paper that were tossed to us from the translators' booths in the assembly. So that's what I was doing at 18. And, of course, I did have another language then, French. I haven't had to use it in so long that I don't know how glib I would be using the French. Then, of course, I came back to Canada in around 62, got married, and did law here. I was working in the field of practical law while my kids were growing up. And then I went back to the UN in 1986 and did the same work, but then we had computers, so we had a long 6-week course on how to work on the Wang computer, I believe they were then. And so I went on from there, came back home in 92, and joined the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform, and they have chapters in every country on the globe. And while I was in the States, of course, I got interested in the monetary things because I was reading from monetary groups in the U.S. that were very concerned about the Federal Reserve and who was creating the money, issuing it, and charging interest on this money, which they merely printed. So I got interested in that in those years, and I met several people from different monetary groups. And when I came back to Canada, I got involved with the chapter here in Toronto. So, and as I say, I've been doing articles for Discourse and Disclosure, which was a Canadian national paper, a periodical. The government got it, Ottawa got it, the legislatures subscribed to it, and I've done about 60 articles on money, I would say, since 1998. And I'm still continuing to write for other papers in the city of Toronto here. And I'm still continuing to teach Studies in Propaganda, which is the title of my class. And the funny thing was that the university came to some of us, because we were alumni, and asked us if we would volunteer to give courses to the community, free courses in the name of the school for people who couldn't afford $1,000 for one term. So a lot of us agreed to do that, and I hear that mine is probably the only class still going after 7 years. And I have about 100 people, give or take a few, and they've changed over the years. But basically, I have about 100, and I do 10 Mondays from 6 to 8 p.m. on a Monday in the spring and 10 Mondays in the fall. So I'll be back again October 1st. And then my students wanted tapes of the lectures, which are 2 hours long. So now I have, in the last 3 years, they've been buying tapes of the class, that whatever their favorites were, and they've been buying tapes, and so they've been circulating. So even though I didn't plan it to be such a big concern, that's what's happened. And of course, I give talks in areas around Toronto. Different groups ask me to come and speak. So that's about it.
Okay, now researchers and writers like Ralph Epperson, G. Edward Griffin, Dr. John Coleman, Anthony C. Sutton, and Eustace Mullins, these are a few of the authors and researchers that have gone into the Federal Reserve. And
That's
you're
right.
one of the select few here in Canada, in Toronto in particular, that is giving the scoop on the Federal Reserve. Now, Eric Huffschmied in the back there, he must listen to the names, because he's been asking the same questions of a few of our past guests of who are the people that we should be pointing a finger at, and who are the 13 corporate family corporate members of these banking elite families that make up the Federal Reserve. Let's get into that right away.
Okay, right off the bat, yes, that's fine. I'm hearing an echo of myself. Are you hearing that echo?
No,
I don't hear it.
No, it's okay for me.
No,
Fine, then I'll just continue with this anyway, and let me know if you have a problem. The Federal Reserve's principal owners are 8 families who own all the Class A shares, and their identities were never to be revealed. However, R.E. McMaster, the publisher of the financial paper, The Reaper, divulged them, and these are the names. So if you're just typing this down or taping it, here it is. The Rothschild Banks of London and Berlin, Lazard Brothers Banks of Paris, Israel Moses Seif Banks of Italy, Warburg Bank of Hamburg and Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers Bank of New York, Kuhn Loeb Bank of New York, Chase Manhattan Bank of New York, and Goldman Sachs Bank of New York. These people own the Fed through 300 stockholders who know each other and are sometimes related, lots of times related. We don't need to call them the New World Order or the Illuminati. They are simply a small group of greedy bankers who print money from thin air and charge corrupt governments interest. And they have stolen all our public assets with this fraudulent scheme. Is that enough?
Scheme, boy, that's enough to blow your socks off, Sydney, when you come out with that. Now, how did they get into the scheme, and what is their end result? It looks like they want to profiteer from taking all the resources from all the countries worldwide. So,
that's right.
How did they start this? Somehow you clued in 1913. How does this happen when this Federal Reserve Act was brought in that year? Explain what happened on this Deer Island, but Jekyll Island.
Well, a long time before Jekyll Island, other things happened. I mean, history states that compound interest on loans goes back to Babylon and was called usury. It was considered a crime for centuries, and any who committed it were forbidden burial in sacred ground. You could not be buried in churchyards at all if you committed the crime of usury. But by about the 11th century, the goldsmith banker revived this condemned practice.